and welcome to this morning's Education, Children and Young People's Executive. Can those online hear okay? Yep. Okay, that's great. Thank you. First of all, do we have any apologies?
Yes, Convener, we have apologies from Margaret Wilson, who is one of the newly appointed parent representatives, from Caitlin Mossman, our care experienced young person on the executive, and understand Councillor Bundy is going to join remotely, but he's having some difficulty at the moment, so we should have him shortly.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Any declarations of interest? No, thank you. We move to the minute of the meeting of the 21st of March. They're there for information and accuracy. Are we happy to agree the minute? Is there anything that anybody wants to ask in relation to the minute? No. Okay, thank you. Item 4 is the rolling action log, and I'll go to Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Convener. And as usual, the rolling action log is provided for the executive to allow you to see where there are outstanding actions, where you have called for reports. Where the report is not available by the expected reporting date, there will be an explanation provided. The rolling action log appears to be up to date, but is available for questions from members.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moody. Is there any questions on the rolling action log? No. Okay, that's great. Moving on to an agenda proper, and the first item is the membership of the Education, Children and Young People's Executive, and I'll go to Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Convener. And this short report is simply the formal stage of appointing the new parent representatives to the committee. The report sets out the process that has been undertaken for the nomination of the two members, and you'll see that the committee is asked to appoint Charlotte Larkin and Margaret Wilson as members of the executive.
Thank you, Colin. I'm happy to move the report and just welcome our parent members to the executive. I know that Charlotte, you're with us today, so very welcome. Margaret's not able to attend today, but I'm happy to move that we accept the nominations to the report.
Happy second, if that's.
Thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Okay, everybody content with that? Thank you. We're into our non-education functions, our children's social work services, and the first item we have is the recruitment and retention of social workers and occupational therapists, and Aaron Singh is going to take this paper for us. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Convener. So to provide a quick context, over the past year, a number of reports have been presented to the executive which have made reference to workforce challenges in social work. So this report provides a detailed information on what those challenges are that relate to our retention and recruitment of social workers and occupational therapists. The purpose of the report is noted in section 1, which highlights the loss of experienced staff and the current level of vacancies, which presents risks to fulfilling our statutory duties and protecting vulnerable children and adults. Importantly, this report provides the executive with the positive actions that have been taken to ensure that Falkirk is in a stronger position to manage the recruitment and retention of social workers and occupational therapists moving forward. Section 4 of the report provides a background which notes how vacancy rates across all care services have dramatically deteriorated over the past few years. We've heard a lot in the social media about staffing shortages across different professional sectors. The changing workforce landscape in social work, in particular post-pandemic, is impacting on service delivery when it's most needed by individuals and communities in need. As detailed, setting the bar for Social Work Scotland, which was a report published in June 2022, identifies 3 main challenges that are faced by social workers, namely administrative burdens, policy landscape with an increase in volume and complexity, and financial pressures which are impacting on the implementation of new pieces of legislation. Social workers and occupational therapists turnover within the service is presenting a real challenge to service areas. We're aware of a number of contributing factors noted in section 4.2 of the report, which include the cost of living crisis experienced by frontline staff, the cost of transport, and importantly, viewing work differently post-pandemic. We also have staff who have told us that they are leaving the council to go elsewhere because they get paid better in other areas. Services are now almost exclusively recruiting newly qualified social workers and occupational therapists. The report goes on to note that the investment in staff who are only staying with the service for a few years and the importance of having experienced practitioners who build up experience and deal with complex human dynamics is absolutely crucial. We are concerned that exposing staff who have limited experience to complex casework can have a detrimental impact on their overall resilience, which means it is likely that they may be more risk averse, resulting in individuals being kept in services for longer. Even with the rolling recruitment drive during 2022, vacancies have remained unfilled. Our benchmarking, as noticed in Appendix A, has shown even where Falkirk Council is offering a higher starting salary, its hourly top rate of the salary scale is the lowest in Scotland, making the retention of staff extremely difficult. Challenges and risks are detailed in section 4.3 of the report, where it's noted that the use of agency staff to fill gaps in our staffing is resulting in budget pressures and not being the best value for money for the council. Section 4.4 of the report notes the impact of the reduced staffing on service delivery, whether that's unallocated cases growing in tandem with the rise in vacancies or cases taking longer to allocate due to the lack of staff. Importantly, we recognise the position is not sustainable without intervention. Section 5 of the report outlines the important action that has been taken to address the issues outlined so far in the report. A review of the existing staffing structure was carried out to consider what effective action could be taken to address the retention of experienced staff. And it was concluded that a service redesign was the best option forward, and an options appraisal was taken. The report outlines the old and new service structures and 2 new posts that have been created of assistant team manager and advanced practitioner. The new post was subsequently regraded in February 2023. Senior workers across services were covering tasks differently, and to ensure consistency, it was agreed to delete this role and create the new post of assistant team manager, which would focus on the management task. To support the retention of experienced staff, the creation of the advanced practitioner role for social workers and occupational therapists would allow us to attract experienced staff with an ongoing commitment to learning and development opportunities. We've defined the role of the advanced practitioner based on the key characteristics of the British Association for Social Workers, the Scottish Social Services Council, and the Royal College of Occupational Therapy. As part of our investment in our existing workforce, we have ensured that they have been afforded the opportunity to apply for these new posts in the first instance. A newly designed recruitment strategy is being taken forward, which heralds Falkirk's new approach and structure, which will be used in our external adverts for these posts. Heads of service and our own social workers have contributed to video clips, which will be widely used as part of that advertising campaign, and we will show those at the end of this presentation. You'll also see that staff speak positively of Falkirk's workforce development opportunities, and leaders have emphasised the importance of the new structure and the opportunities that creates, and also the importance of supporting our communities and the teams and carers that they will be supporting too. As noted in section 6 of the report under consultation, a period of consultation was undertaken with trade union colleagues and social workers and occupational therapists and senior workers on the new staffing model outlined. Overwhelmingly, the staff feedback on the new model was extremely positive. The financial implications are outlined in section 7 of the report for each of the service areas, and we have created enough capacity for 60% of existing social work posts to be converted to advanced practitioners to support the retention of staff. This section details how Scottish Government investment monies to the Health and Social Care Partnership for Adult Social Care is being utilised to wholly fund the adult services and part fund 30% of the financial commitment for justice and children's services. And I'd like to take the opportunity at this point in time to thank the Director of Health and Social Care Partnership for their wider contribution and commitment to the social work profession. Notwithstanding the investment noted, the report recognises that in order to fully fund the children's services investment, a shortfall will be met by removing posts from the Children and Families establishment. We do hope that by reducing vacancies and attracting and retaining experienced staff, both social workers and occupational therapists, we will ensure that we are able to meet our statutory obligations. So by concluding the report, we highlight how social work services across Falkirk, that's both children, adults and justice, have worked together to implement the new revised staffing structure that rewards advanced learning and retains experience. And the new posts provide a unique opportunity to evidence investment, not only in our workforce, but also in the communities we serve as well. If I can take members back to the recommendations in section 2. So the executive is asked to note that the recruitment and retention challenges, as noted in the report, the effective actions that have been taken, which places Falkirk in a far better position in terms of the recruitment and retention of social workers and occupational therapists, and the support that's been received by the Health and Social Care Partnership to ensure a consistent approach in our recruitment and retention of social workers across all service areas. If conveners agreeable, we are now wanting to show the executive clips of the recruitment drive that we're taking forward.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. We've got Heather on standby to present, so she can run the videos now. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Lacey and I'm the Chief Social Work Officer for Falkirk Council. Whether you're starting a new career or getting ready to take your next step, we're pleased you're considering doing so with Falkirk. This is an exciting time to join our social work services as we roll out a refreshed staffing structure with improved career opportunities. You'll quickly become an important part of people's lives, and by doing so will make a huge difference. Your efforts will ensure people in Falkirk live their lives to the fullest. Every day in social work and social care can look different, challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. So, what's our offer to you? We're fostering a culture which values openness, creativity and experimentation to solve problems. We're promising more development opportunities, which is why we've introduced new roles for experienced staff, helping colleagues progress their career and mentor newly qualified team members. And lastly, you'll join a team that cares, a team that is supportive of each other and of the communities we serve. We're proud to serve the people of Falkirk and look forward to welcoming you to our team.
My name's Jennifer and I work for Adult Services.
Yep, my name's Ashley and I'm a Senior Social Worker in Children and Families.
My name is Kimberly Watts and I'm a Senior Social Worker in the West locality, which covers Denny and Stenhousemuir.
Hi, my name's Ingrid. I'm a newly qualified social worker in Children and Families in the West locality in Falkirk.
People should consider working here because it's a fantastically supportive team and it's just an all-round good working environment.
I like Falkirk Council because I've had really positive experiences in Falkirk of management, of supervision, really good learning opportunities.
I was really impressed when I came to Falkirk at how well supported I was as a student. I was very impressed with the training and development opportunities that were available through Falkirk, and I suppose the whole ethos of working with families and how we kind of undertook the social work role.
Like, my team are incredible. Like, we all lean on each other. We've got, like, you know, we're there to support each other personally and professionally. But it's not just that level of support. It's if you have a question, I know the team will go above and beyond to support me in every way.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you for showing these. Well done, Sarah. You did that hopefully in one take. Okay, I'll move to Councillor Colley.
Thanks. I don't intend to say a great deal. The content in the report, I think, is very comprehensive, and obviously the videos that we've just seen, it's a really positive report, and there's been a lot of work put into bringing this through to fruition, led by Sarah and Aaron and Martin and the Health and Social Care Partnership. They've deeply explored the options available and the challenges and the opportunities to address these. I think the opportunity of that joint working between Falkirk Council and the Health and Social Care Partnership to really look at social work in its whole sense, and how do we recruit and retain social workers and other professionals within our council. So I think it's been an excellent piece of work. The creation of these new opportunities will support recruitment and retention and provide opportunities for development, and hopefully will make Falkirk an employer not just of choice to join, but of choice to stay. This will benefit the children, young people and families and adults, of course, that we work with. Just in closing, I'd just like to say a final note of thanks to everyone involved in this piece of work, and I think you'll see from Appendix 2 that there's a lot of other work going on in terms of recruitment, retention, support and staff development, and this is just part of it. So particularly saying the recruitment and retention working group, great deal of work that they've put into it, and all the staff and trade unions for their positive engagement, and the ongoing work in creating the best opportunities in Falkirk. I'm very happy to propose the report.
Thank you, Councillor Colley. I'm happy to second the report. In practice, we talked very much about lived experience, and I think having the lived experience of the staff that are currently with us, I think it's really important, because that gives a reflection of the authority. I think we've got something, well, we are very unique. We've got a unique offering in Falkirk, and I think the video kind of showed that, but it is unique, and having a slightly different structure that does give that ability for particularly newly qualified staff to have a career progression, to gain experience, and you know, remembering that we are in between two of the largest cities of being Edinburgh and Glasgow, and that's where the ability to pay higher wages, and we are. We're right in the middle, but we can give a good experience to staff here. So there's a lot of work going into developing this, and as Councillor Colley said, that it's gone across boundaries into Health and Social Care Partnership, as it should, and that allows that collaborative and working going forward. So a good job, and I hope that we then do get that ability to recruit staff that will help deliver the best of service that we can for the Falkirk area. On that, I will now open it up for any questions or comments.
Thank you,
Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, convener, and thank you for this excellent report. And I'm well aware, both in the health and social care side and in the children and family side, about the issues of recruitment, and also aware that that is impacting across the whole of Scotland. So thank you for this. Now, I recognise that this is an immediate reaction to the current situation to try and improve recruitment, but it is a little counterintuitive that somehow we improve our recruitment by reducing our posts, and it doesn't seem to me that at this point it actually addresses the issue that our top line is the lowest in Scotland. And I wonder if you could say a bit about when you're going to report back in terms of the impact of these changes. I recognise the need for the changes and the urgent need for the changes, but it's when you would be reporting back, and on how effective it's been, and what you'll be doing to look at the next steps.
Thank you. This has, I suppose, been a very kind of planned piece of work that we've been looking to undertake. We've recognised for some time that we have had real challenges in terms of the recruitment of social workers, and in particular the retention of social workers. I think your point is really important. We're not here to say that this is a panacea, that we have sorted everything. You're absolutely right. The posts are currently advertised at the moment, and we will be working to see what the response has been. We're also mindful that we're going to have to give that some time, because recruitment is there are pinch points to recruitment at different points of the year, depending on when annual leave, individuals, when universities graduate, and all these kind of different milestones. So we'll probably be looking to come back on the commitment that we've given to the trade unions, is that we'll be looking to have further dialogue with them in a year's time to see what the impact of that has been, and whether or not we need to further refine the process around the advanced practitioners, or whether or not it's actually yielding the results that we want it to do so.
Thank you.
Okay, regarding recruitment and retention, you mentioned the cost of living for staff. Have there been approaches from the union to expand their wages, etc.? You didn't go into any detail about being an equal opportunity employer, and I didn't see a great deal of that on the video, because we are an inclusive council, and if you could expand on these 3 points.
So in terms of the trade unions, we hadn't been approached by the trade unions in relation to the retention and recruitment of social workers. That was something that we had been monitoring ourselves as a service, and as detailed in the Appendix 2, there has been a working group looking at the retention and recruitment of social workers. So we've been trying to track that ourselves. We're recognising the much broader challenges, I guess, for everybody, not just our frontline workforce, but everybody in this room as well, around the cost of living crisis, and what that means, whether that was the cost of fuel, which you'll be aware had almost doubled over the space of a couple of months, fuel kind of price in terms of gas and electricity. So there were a number of challenges.
I think that's a problem endemic to everybody in the country at the moment.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But I suppose the point being is individuals were then making choices on the back of that. So we had social workers who were travelling from further afield, who were crossing 2 or 3 different local authorities to come to work in Falkirk. And I guess they were taking the opportunity to reevaluate, actually, why am I doing that? Would it be easy for me to work closer to home? So I think there were a whole magnitude of issues that the workforce were considering when they were being financially squeezed, ultimately. In terms of equal opportunities, I think we have just double check the section in the report where we did do a poverty impact quality assessment, where we did identify exactly those individuals who would be impacted by this, and what we found was actually there would be it would be far better in terms of the proposals that we were putting forward, in terms of increasing salary, in terms of also addressing poverty in the community as well.
So you would say then we are inclusive?
Yes, I mean, I've got nothing to say that we're not inclusive.
I'll maybe speak to you later.
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay, thank you, Michael, and then I've got Councillor Nimmo and Councillor Steinbeck.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for your report. It's very good, and obviously it's been a trend. It's been going on for a while, so presumably you've been monitoring that, and before it got into this place, presumably what you've just said with the pandemic and things like that, it amplified that and made it worse. But I presume there will be an ongoing commitment to look and evaluate it, where this is heading, so that we don't get in that kind of position again. So presumably that's built into what we're doing, and what you've just said in relation to talking to trade unions, and a year from now we'll be doing that too. We're right in thinking that.
Yes, absolutely. We've given that commitment to do so.
Yeah, and secondly, that looking at the report, it's saying that a lot of the cases are more complex now than they've ever been before, which takes a lot more time to progress, and obviously it adds to the caseload and then the administrative challenges and stuff like that. It just made me think, what's the social work budget been in the last 10 years in relation to that, in relation to all the challenges? If we were to look back over the last 10 years, and how would that compare with the education budget? Is it possible to maybe find that out at some point and let us know that?
We could look into that, and I could contact you off table.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Just interested to see what the trend has been with the increased demands, what the budget has been over the last 10 years and how it compares over the last 10 years with education.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Councillor Nimble.
Thanks, convener. Thanks very much for your report. Now, I realise it's only for noting. There's no decision to be taken here. To be honest, I don't think we have the full picture in relation to the problem, and removing posts isn't the answer in the long term. It's basically down to money and what we pay our social workers. If you look at page 28, under the hourly rate, there's a number of figures quoted here. Now, I don't think it helps the case to compare Falkirk salaries with the national average. I think the gap in that case is possibly artificially low, because depending on what other local authority you're comparing Falkirk against, the gap could be considerably higher. There's issues with that. And going forward, I really think something needs to be done as far as the salary scales are concerned, whether that's locally or preferably nationally. I'm just wondering what input COSLA has to this. Are we talking about the possibility of a national pay structure for social workers? Because that would go a long way in trying to help solve the problem.
So the National Care Service, which had been proposed by the Scottish Government about 2 years ago, was going to look to standardise salaries across the whole kind of social care workforce. Clearly, there's a bit of a hiatus in terms of the progression of that, but there is also going to be the introduction of the National Social Work Agency, and there's been a commitment by the Scottish Government in order to pursue that, and I'm aware that there are developments that are around that. So there is a commitment to trying to equalise as much as possible. There is a recognition, I guess, that local authorities are competing, I guess, for the same social workers, because there's also an issue in terms of capacity as well. So you're absolutely right, and I think we are waiting to see what comes out of both the National Care Service, but also the National Social Work Agency as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Steenbank.
Thank you, convener. It's just a few questions following on from Councillor Nimble there. 4.2 refers to immense investment in the training and development of newly qualified social workers and occupational therapists that are only staying with us for a few years. Could you elaborate just a bit more on the scale of the time and resources we're committing and is costing us in training and personal development for those members of staff who are leaving?
So I mean, I don't have a financial figure, but what I would say is that the first 2 years of any practitioners starting with any new employer, whether it's a social worker or occupational therapy, is going to be the most resource intensive, just in relation to making sure that they have the training and development opportunities available to them, where they're trained on the IT systems. We have investment, I guess, from our managers in terms of the additional support that they require, support from their colleagues as well in terms of doing joint home visits. So it's a very, very resource intensive time for staff in the first couple of years. And when staff are only staying with us for a couple of years, all of that investment basically goes with that individual to their new employer.
Thank you very much. And as a follow-up again on the same topic, within any sort of exit review process or conversations we're having with staff who are leaving, do we have any idea of how many are leaving for similar posts, a sort of horizontal move, just a different local authority, or how many are leaving for more senior roles at different local authorities, or, for example, other employment opportunity?
So, I mean, it's a mixed bag, is what I would say to you. As I said, folk are reevaluating their lives, their priorities, I guess. Some are looking, choosing to work close to home in the same grade of being a social worker. Others have been given opportunities for promotion and are therefore leaving for those posts. So I would say there's no one reason individuals are leaving. I would also say that the information we get back from exit interviews is also rather limited as well. We have tried extensively to try and expand that. Clearly, it's always going to be reliant on an individual feeding back in terms of why they are leaving, and we do encourage those informal conversations, but it is a very mixed picture is what we're saying.
Thank you. Just my final question is 4.2 refers to the risk of staff with limited experience, as you mentioned, developing risk aversion when handling complex casework. I think just for elaboration again, what does risk aversion look like compared to what you would expect as they develop experience, and what harm might that cause to the fulfilment of the objectives of their role?
So when we talk about individuals, staff being risk averse, within the context of the report, what we're saying is that individuals who have less experience are likely to be more risk averse. Whereas if you have an individual who has 5 or 10 years of experience, they're much more able to manage and handle risk. Whereas somebody who's only got a couple of years experience are more likely to escalate, I guess, to secure high cost resources. So I suppose that would be a really kind of practical example of the difference between somebody being kind of, newly qualified and experienced, but somebody being kind of experienced and holding on to that risk for longer.
Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Kerr and Councillor Patterson.
Thanks, convener. With regards to the video, you see Glasgow does it nationally with a bigger local authority. Where is the video seen and who are we trying to catch?
So I suppose the video only kind of was made live 2 weeks ago, so it's very early doors. What we do have it on is we have it on all our My Job Scotland advert pages. So when anybody links or taps a link to look at the advert, then there's an opportunity to access the links that take you onto the YouTube video. We would also work in extensively with our colleagues in the comms team, both from the council and from the Health and Social Care Partnership, to see whether or not we can also put it on kind of social media sites as well. So I suppose it's going to be an evolution of the next couple of months as we look to kind of progress that out more widely.
Would we consider putting out to all the secondary schools?
It's not something we've considered at the moment, but there's nothing to say we would. I mean, I suppose we would want to kind of consider it as part of a kind of a job fair type of kind of approach, and also maybe the colleges would probably be more appropriate than the schools. And so, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do, as I said, have a group that's looking at the retention and recruitment of staff more broadly, whether it's social workers, whether it's kind of care at home staff. So I suppose we will look at a kind of a whole system approach to advertising the videos that we have.
I just feel that going to the schools, we're getting local interested in Falkirk. With regards to when you mentioned about people going to university to get their qualifications, is it only university or can they get it through college?
It's a degree qualification, so they need to have it from an accredited university.
Okay, thank you. And probably not a question, but just a comment. As we all know, there's many more people seeking help from social work. As is mentioned before, the wage structure isn't going to help us. So probably then a question, and how do you feel that with increase of people using the social work, how can we cope with the amount of people who's got to use it?
I think you're right. I think it's a dilemma. I think what the paper shows is that we are in a much more strengthened position in Falkirk now than we've ever been in terms of competing for registered social workers and occupational therapists in relation to our kind of neighbouring local authorities. So I think we are going to see how that materializes in terms of kind of getting a stronger workforce. We hope and anticipate that the advanced practitioner role isn't just a role that sits in isolation, but it's actually backed up by postgraduate qualifications. So actually, if we have a much more competent and much more competent workforce, then we'll be able to look to address some of those kind of more complex issues in a way that's going to be evidence-based, I guess.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the report and the way that you've answered the questions. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Patterson.
Thanks, Convener. Thank you, Aaron and Sarah, for the report. No questions from me, you'll be glad to hear. Just a very brief comment. I just really wanted to commend the proactive actions that have been outlined in this report. It's obvious from the video and it's obvious from everything that we're hearing that Falkirk Social Services has a really positive culture and that it values the staff that we have. It is unfortunate that recruitment and crucially the retention of staff is always going to be an issue until the decision is made to properly fund the posts. I do hope that the recommendations in this report have a positive impact, and I'm looking forward to seeing how things progress within your service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Patterson, and particularly ending on such a positive point. I'll just go to Councillor Colley to see if there's any final comments she would wish to make in summing up.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for all the questions. I think it just shows how much we're all committed and all really keen to see the best workforce and being able to retain that best workforce. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Aaron and Sarah, again.
Okay, thank you. Are we content to agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. We're moving into the education functions. I am aware that there are a number of motions and amendments in relation to the next item, which is on the change of distance criteria for school transport. So I think I'm going to call a short recess just to allow those to be printed and circulated so that everybody's aware of what's on the table, and then we'll come back. So if we can maybe take 10-15 minutes. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, can we come back into session? Apologies for what turned out to be a very long 15 minutes, but we wanted to make sure we had time to give consideration properly to the process and the procedure. On that, we're moving to item 7, which is the formal consultation and proposal to change the distance criteria for home to school transport. And because of the complexities we have, I'm going to go to Mr. Moody, who will explain the process.
Yes, thank you, Convener. And you have before you in your agenda the report from the Directors of Children's Services and Place Services in relation to the proposal. Now, in addition to that report, since it has been issued, there's also been a supplementary agenda which includes deputation requests. So we have a deputation request from 2 members of the Scottish Youth Parliament. Also circulated during the course of this morning, we have a motion from the administration, we have an amendment from the Labour group, and we have an amendment from the Conservative group. Now, the nature of the amendment from the Conservative group is a procedural one, and what that essentially does is to
point the information. The amendment from the administration, I thought the agenda was the administration.
No.
Is that not the ruling you gave last time on the school pools?
No. The recommendations contained within the report are recommendations from the 2 directors that I've referred to already. The administration motion is the motion as circulated from the administration. So turning back to the issue of the Conservative amendment, I think it can be seen that the Conservative amendment seeks the decision to be moved from the Education, Children and Young People Executive to the full Council, and seeks some further information to be provided if the matter is moved from this executive to the Council. Accordingly, that's a motion which logically comes before consideration of the issue of the actual substantive question on which is put before you in the report and in the SNP motion and the Labour amendment. And the Conservative amendment should properly then be dealt with first to consider whether the matter is dealt with here or at full Council. I should say something about the consequence of that for the deputation request. If the Conservative amendment is agreed, which moves the matter to full Council, then the deputation request will be carried forward to the full Council and won't need to be made afresh. Accordingly, Convener, I would suggest that the proper procedure now then is to hear from Councillor Kerr to move his procedural amendment to move the matter to Council.
Would this be the proper time to come in and give notice of a further amendment?
If the Conservative amendment is carried, then no, because the business will end at that point. It will then be considered at full Council. If the Conservative amendment is not carried, then there will be consideration of the administration motion and the Labour amendment, and there'll be an opportunity to give notice of your further amendment at that point.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. In the report, there are many questions that we wanted answered before we made the decision. And what we wanted for the officers to do, we would like the committee to agree that the issue regarding home school be considered at full Council. And when all the issues considered by the Council, the following information should be presented. Alternative savings in order that the Council can properly consider the current proposals along with alternatives. With regard to that, there are suggestions that there are worse proposals that could be there. We would like to hear what the proposals are, because there is savings to be made and there have got to be tough decisions to be made. So we'd like to know exactly what the proposals or what worst proposals are, or if they are somebody's own thoughts. Consider of the impact of breakfast clubs usage. If we had agreed to this today, obviously people would need to leave the house earlier. If they didn't leave the house earlier, would they be able to use the breakfast clubs? Because these breakfast clubs are vital for our young people who are sometimes isolated and often hungry. So we would like a report to come back on that. A full report on the impact of the environmental impact considering car use. There are no projections, but just simply a recognition that there's likely to lead to higher car usage. Full information on the assess safe and unsafe routes. We have in pages 65, 66, where we've got routes where it says these will be assessed by road engineers to see if they can be made safe. We would like that information before a decision is made, because making that decision before that assessment has been made, we don't think it's prudent. And information on the level of uptake for the National Entitlement Card. I think it's a valuable piece of information that we need. That is our amendment. There is pieces in the administration's amendment that we supported, but hopefully that will go forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerr. Do you have a seconder?
Convener, I'm happy to second and reserve the right to comment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bundy. In which case, I'll ask the committee, are we agreed to move the matter to full council?
Could I just ask, I don't disagree in principle with moving this to full council, but I am concerned that this delays the uncertainty for families. So it would be important that we have some guarantee of when it's going to come to full council. Will it be before the end of this session, the June full council, or is it going to be further down the road? I think it's important that our constituents actually know what the certainty is of at least a decision being made.
Okay, Mr Greenhorn, do you want to give a wee bit of clarity about what the timescales might mean and the implications of that?
Okay, thanks very much, Convener. In terms of the options that Councillor Kerr outlined, to do that work, it would be impossible to get information back for June committee, given the timelines that committee papers have got to be prepared for in advance and circulated. Realistically, we're looking at probably having information for probably late August, September. The question that Councillor Hannah asked about when with the possible implementation date with this, and I suppose the question here is, could you implement these changes mid-year? And the answer to that is yes, you can, but there's some additional work attached to it the earliest possible date, and I was talking to my colleague Chris Cox, the Transport Manager, having seen the amendments that came forward, is that the earliest possible date for that would be January. Realistically, it's always better to do it at the start of term, so you're not displacing pupils and families unnecessarily throughout the year. But that would be a decision that we'd come to when we put the actual paper itself. So I suppose what I'm saying is that the earliest we would have the paper ready would be then probably mid to the end of August with information in it, and then it would come to full council after that. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you for that, Gary.
Could I just check, sorry, would that be 27th September then? Because that would be the
That'd be next full council. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We will now move on to item 8 and the end of the PP contract update. And I'll just give Mr Greenhorn a minute or two to get his papers sorted, and we'll go across to Gary for the next item.
Okay, thanks very much, Convener. Colleagues, I'm really pleased to bring this report to the executive today. Essentially, it's an update paper, and it looks at giving updates on the various work streams that we've been carrying out through the subgroup that's meeting to progress the end of the school's PPP contract. And it's also looking to get a couple of agreements on the allocation of these to help us progress with the work, the necessary work that's associated with it. Also in section 1.2, the recommendations of this report align with the council plan in terms of supporting the thriving economy, green transition and the reduction of carbon emissions from a rationalised and modernised school and learning estate. There's 4 recommendations before the executive this morning outlined in section 2.1. I'll come back to them at the end of the report. Section 4 confirms just some background information. It simply confirms the timelines that we're working to, and also confirms in section 4.2 the 5 properties, schools that are affected by the end of the PPP contract. Turning on to section 5 and the considerations. Section 5.1 confirms that we do have a multidisciplinary team in place called the project team, and we meet fairly regularly. It's not just a multidisciplinary in terms of internal to the council. There's representatives external to the council that give professional and good advice to the team, and we've met regularly over the last 2 years. My colleague, Mr Kettrick, is a key member of that team as well, and he helped co-produce this report that's before the executive this morning. Section 5.2 is a really important but positive step where both parties have independently got independent consultants to carry out a full assessment of the schools, both from the project side and from the council side. And we're very pleased to say that both of those now, what should come from that is an agreed programme of work that we are required to do between now and August of 25 to make sure that any necessary investment to improve the life cycle and span of our school assets are carried out between now and then. And we can't stress how important that work is. It protects our assets. So that work hasn't been completed yet, but probably at the next meeting of the project team we'll get a lot more information on that. And when we bring a report back here, that next update report will have contained within it details of this. Section 5.3, as I've said to the executive before, in terms of in scope for 2P transfer, we probably have about 95 staff covering catering, cleaning, janitorial, site supervision and some of the technical and asset management staff within the contract just now that ordinarily would be in scope for 2P transfer. Significant work has been done thus far to look at the assessment of the catering and cleaning staff in terms of aligning the current roles and responsibilities they have with their own staff structures. The next tranche of work that will be involved in is looking at the janitorial and site supervision staff, and that work started and it's due to be completed at the end of the month, and we're reporting back to the next meeting of the project team. Throughout the summer, we're going to engage with our colleagues in HR to have a clear plan of staff engagement so we can agree a timetable in the lead up with those staff that fall in scope for 2P transfer, so we can get the communication out in advance so they know about it. That work will be completed before the end of summer 23. Throughout this process, I'm pleased to say that trade unions have been regularly kept in the loop. They've been updated mainly through the Children's Services Partnership Forum, which covers all trade union groups that fall within the Children's Services remit, which is all trade unions within the council. And just to say that the final bullet point in that 5.3 confirms that all staff transfers will be progressed under 2P conditions, ensuring that all the employment rights of all staff are protected. 5.4 is another important part. That's one of the asks today, that what we would like to do is bring some specialist external advisors to go around and look at the assess the kitchen equipment. What we want to do here is make sure the kitchen equipment, look at the condition it's in, the life cycle, the span of availability of life it's got left, and also attach it maybe a cost of when we would want to replace it. What we want to do is we want to make sure when we get to August 25, there's no hidden unforeseen risks that fall within kitchens. We want to get the work proactively done in advance, so the project team can quite rightly look at it and see what possible investment or change we need to make to our kitchens, because they do provide a very important asset for our young people that are educated in the schools. Section 5.5 is equally critical, and I'm sure my colleague Mr Kettrick would echo this. What we've got to do is make sure that we protect and maintain our assets in a really good and reasonable condition, and we put in place a future programme of investment in these schools when they're taken over to ensure that life cycle maintenance is carried out, and probably more importantly, we have the necessary resources in place via the capital programme to do so. So our next meeting, we will be looking at how we do that. We will probably need to take some external advice on how we assess the value of life cycle investment going forward, to look at this current state of play for the schools, and to look at how we put a value on how much the council need to set aside to make sure that the life cycle is carried out. Notwithstanding that, the other important part is that we need money to carry out the normal revenue associated reactive maintenance costs. So that external work would determine how much money we set aside to do that investment in the future, either for life cycle, planned life cycle, or reactive maintenance to do the normal day-to-day repairs that are a necessary part of school life. 5.6 sets out the capital position, and the next meeting of the project team will take an assessment from a district valuer to see what the values put on the schools is, and I'm pleased to say that £5 million has already been set aside in the council's capital programme, because the buyback option requires us to pay the lesser of £5 million or the market value of the school sites. So if the school sites are less than £5 million, we would pay the lesser value. 5.7 sets out the revenue position. And I would say, for those of you who looked at the last report, the revenue position has increased because the unitary charges are linked to RPI, and given the current inflation rate, it reflects the increase in the unitary charges from 22-23 to 23-24. The net cost to the council is highlighted at 11.2. That net budget is likely to increase through inflationary pressures over the next 2 years. And it's that net budget that we currently have available to us to make sure that when the schools come back into council ownership, we use that money effectively and correctly to carry out the work, to make sure that the schools continue to be a valuable asset for the council, and indeed we've also fund the staff cost and transferring over from the private side over to the council side as well. It is also expected that from that we will make some savings. The estimate of that, it's just an estimate just now, we don't know what it would be, but the next tranche of work that will do that, we'll try to firm up on that figure so that it can be fed into the financial strategy the council has in the coming months. I'm very pleased to say in section 5.8 we continue to have good engagement class 98 through this, and at the next project team meeting they've been invited along to give their own updates on various things. Discussion will be taken on the future life cycle investment, finalising the buyback position and updating the subcontractor's position and the risk mitigation around the 2P transfer of staff. Consultation is outlined in section 6, and there are a number of risks that are outlined in section 7.3. And one of the risks is that if we don't do it, that we're asking for some extra dedicated specialist staff to come in, mainly to Mr Kettrick's team, and to provide that technical expertise to the project team to ensure that we have a programme of work that gets carried out between now and the handback in August. That's important. We're working to maximise the investment in the schools, because investment at this stage saves the council money after August 25. So that is a vital part of it. The good news is that we've got money in the budget to allow us to do that. So the two asks before the executive today is to allow us to do the kitchen assessment and to allow us to take on that dedicated professional member of staff to help support the project team and Mr. Kettrick's team with that important bit of work. I don't know if Mr. Kettrick's got anything to say on that before we go back to the recommendations, convener.
Nothing to add.
Okay, therefore the recommendation before the executive today outlined in section 2.1 is to note the content of the report, note the revenue and capital position that's outlined, and to agree that the project team could progress with the proposals I mentioned earlier on regarding the assessment of kitchens, and to take on some additional professional support to support the work streams and the project team. And we'll also request that we'll bring a further report back before the end of the current financial year. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Gary. I'll go to Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you, convener, and thank you to Mr. Greenhorn for covering the update report so comprehensively. As such, I don't want to spend too much time going over the points that have already been covered. The fact that the PPP PFI schools contract is coming to an end is in itself a positive way forward for our learning estate and the council as a whole, both in terms of finance and the protection of protection and life cycle of council assets. We should all be more than aware that, given we were the first council to have a model of this type and we're the first council to come to the end of these contracts, that all eyes are on Falkirk Council. And while this comes with significant challenge, there's also a real and tangible opportunity to lead the way. The report outlines the progress we've made so far, how we plan to go forward, and the importance of collaboration with partners to ensure our learning estate is brought into council ownership in optimum condition. Finally, I'd like to thank our officers for bringing forward this report, the recommendations of which I am happy to move. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, convener. I'm happy to second Councillor Sinclair, but I've got two questions, and I don't know whether they go to Gary or Paul. I think probably Paul, but we'll see where that goes. And this one definitely is probably Paul. Can you expand on the work on dilapidations? As Paul knows, I know that side of it, but so that make sure that everybody's quite aware of that, as they are vitally vital to the longevity of the school buildings and for them being fit for purpose for at least the next 25 years. And the second question, and it might be more towards yourself, Gary, but it could be both. Will there be potential of any benefits following the returns from the PPP schools? And I'm thinking there obviously about ongoing maintenance or wherever we would look to invest.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kettrick, you want to take the first question, and then I'll come to Gary.
Thank you, convener. In terms of the end of the contract, there is with PPP contracts, there is two main considerations. One is, as you mentioned quite rightly, dilapidations and reflecting on fair wear and tear. However, the most important part is actually the handback provisions in relation to end-of-life assets within the buildings, and it's vitally critical, and hence why we've asked for the additional resource to go through the buildings. And when I say assets, that could be things like boilers, lighting, where they have reached the end of life. There is a requirement for those to be replaced, or certainly to be brought up to standards that we would expect. So there's a huge area of work in there, both in terms of dilapidations and the handback. I will touch on the second part of the question, then I'll leave it to Gary. One of the big things in bringing the PPP schools back in-house is they can then be managed at a similar level as all our buildings at a similar cost, which actually helps us when we procure contracted works, because we are then, as an authority, procuring for a much larger estate, and there is economies of scale in that, and the costs associated with it are significantly less than the cost that we would be paying at present through the PPP contracts.
Okay, Gary.
Okay, thanks, convener. In terms of customers, second part of the question in terms of the benefits, the tangible benefits, one, the obvious one is we're trying to make sure we deliver savings on this for the benefit of the council overall. And Paul touched on the other benefit. The other benefit is that we can standardise our internal processes in terms of catering, cleaning, standardise menu choices, standardise buying, and from that you get economies of scale, and you get an alignment of service provision across all the schools without this hybrid model where we've got some schools operating with one set of staff and some schools operating with another set of staff that are employed by somebody else. We can apply the same standard that Falkirk expects across all our schools. And from that will all be economies of scale. You can get economies of scale in terms of the procurement of food, the type of equipment that we use, as Paul touched on. So all of that we see as a tangible benefit to go forward, notwithstanding the aim to make reasonable, substantial savings from the current cost just now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I look forward to the end of the PPP schools.
Okay, Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. Obviously, I think we all welcome the return of these schools into the council ownership, whatever anybody thinks of the decision in the first place as to why they were set up in this way. That's where we are now. It's a substantial number of schools and a substantial piece of work that our officers will have to do, both in the education, children and young people, and in the in place services. So good luck to you in that. Two or three questions I have though. First of all, I was glad to hear that we're looking at the dilapidations and trying to maximise what the contractors who have, with the people with whom we have had these contracts, make sure that they do return the schools in a good condition. And I'm glad to hear that that's going to be done. The consultation you mentioned a number of times in relation to the unions, the consultation, I would kind of also like to know that the head teachers, staff and parent councils will all be engaged in this consultation, because it would be nice to be able to say that as well as benefits to the council, we're going to see some benefits for the children and for the education of those children in the future. So I think it's important that that's part of it. The other thing I would like to say is, in terms of the forward investment, I think it's really important that we take into account retrofitting in terms of insulation, in terms of reducing the carbon footprints. Much has been said about the carbon footprint of our buildings. Every school has a roof. Could every school not also have a solar panel?
Gary.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Hannah. In terms of consultation, I honestly couldn't agree more. The next stage of the work over the summer is to look at the staff consultation, and from that will flow. Just to give a reassurance as well, head teachers are well aware of it, but obviously the important part is how we then bridge that gap with parent councils as well. So over the summer, we're looking at communication with the staff to make sure we get it right, and following that there'll be subgroups set, and I think we will at the same point look at how we engage a bit more effectively with the parent councils, and more importantly how we make sure the staff and the pupils are taken on board with it as well. So I agree wholeheartedly with that view, and that's what the project team will do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Convener. I heard Gary talk about the economies of scale of the procurement of food, and I was just wondering if there'd been any update regarding the Conservative amendment from before Christmas regarding seeking collaboration with Food for Life Scotland.
Okay.
Okay.
Pathetic.
What I can do, Councillor Bundy, is I can talk to you off table about the progress we're trying to make on that. There are ongoing talks. We've not finalised things, but there's positive talks going on at a national level that will help support that agenda. So I'm happy to talk to you off table about it. And what we can do is the next update report, we can make sure if there is a national agreement on how we're doing it, it will be included in that report as well.
Yeah, thanks, Gary.
Okay, any other contributions? Councillor Spears.
Yeah, maybe no notice, but my light was on first.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't notice. I think it was maybe the light's just catching it. Apologies.
Accepted. You spoke Mr. Greenhorn, about financial savings. Will that money be spent on other schools? Will it include some of our neglected primary schools? Will Bowhouse Primary eventually get a sign put up saying it's Bowhouse Primary? Will that money go to try and bring our other schools up to date? My second question was somewhat similar to Councillor Bowsey's regarding the general maintenance of these schools. Will it be up to date? I know the equipment won't be new, and I'm thinking here of the auxiliary equipment and services, but we don't want to buy a pig in a poke and something that's worn out and out of date, and then we're going to cost us a fortune to do some sort of a turnaround or overhaul to bring them up to standard. So will that be written into the contract that the maintenance records will be passed on and we'll know exactly the wear and tear and age of that equipment? But mainly about the financial savings, will that be spent on the full school portfolio or just high school?
Okay. I'm glad you raised that question, Councillor Spears, because it's a really important question, to be honest with you. In terms of the savings, we do want to make savings, but it's what you use the potential of that savings pot for that's critical. So part could be used for savings, and part could also be used to carry out further investments in the wider school estate. And we've already spoken to a project team about that ambition, because this gives us the opportunity. And albeit at this current moment in time, we don't quite know how inflation will be when we get to 25, 26 to look at the size of the pot. But what we do know is the pot will increase. So it gives us a wider opportunity and something that we've not had for long enough, a chance to look at how we can properly divert some of the money into other worthwhile investment in the school estate. I'll hand you across to Mr. Kerrick because he's got experience of that work. Thank you.
I know that with the PFIs as well, a lot of the money's went paying that, and some of our older schools, mid-schools, have been somewhat neglected, and they need serious investment and brought up to date. Thank you.
Paul.
Thanks, convener. Schools are our priority buildings. They're our core estate. They're the ones that statutorily we have to keep, and they're the ones that provide us the most opportunity for the delivery of services going forward, because they can be used a lot more intensively. And with that in mind, we really need to be looking at investing in our estate, not just the schools that are involved in this paper, but across the wider estate. One of my priorities is to look across the whole estate and identify our needs, and for us to identify planned improvement programmes, which is looking ahead to look at things like fabric, mechanical and electrical replacements before they get to the stage where they start to become a detriment to the delivery of education through building failure and potentially closures at that point. That's a huge exercise. These resources that can be unlocked from PPP, whilst it's essential we make savings, can also be redirected across the wider estate. And that's part of the work that we will be looking at going forward. You mentioned in terms of the PPP contracts and the standard of equipment that comes back and the condition of the buildings. What I would say is written into the contract's already written, it's 25 years old. That's coming to an end in 2025. So that actually sets out clear requirements. Is it as good as I would like? No, that's why they don't do them in that style anymore. However, there is a number of opportunities in there in terms of handback provisions, which is assets that are at the end of their life. We need to be ensuring that those clauses are enforced. In terms of the cyclical replacement of assets, we need to be ensuring that up to 2025 we have full visibility on those. And then the last question, when you asked about the age of the assets and what we get back, is you actually have that at the start and at the end. So we will have that record of all the individual assets, when they were serviced last, when they were last replaced, what they are. All that will come back to us as part of, in effect, that diligence process that we would have, so that for us going forward, we have an understanding as to what that building's going to maintain. And again, that's part of the work that we're doing. And in doing that, that means that we can estimate what A, the budget saving could potentially be, but also B, what other resources could be freed up, because there will still be a continuing cost to manage these buildings, and secondary schools are expensive for high tariff buildings. You can easily spend huge budgets on maintaining the reactive repairs, but also a planned improvements programme. They are complicated buildings and they come with a cost.
And the difficulty of getting replacement parts for 25-year-old equipment. The whole lighting system in the country has changed to low voltage, and with our climate change initiatives trying to get to zero emissions, I would imagine there's going to be a great deal of cost. And when we take over these schools, bringing them up to the standard that's hoped by the Scottish Government. Thank you.
If I could come back on that, Convener, we already have a programme in place, and solar panels were mentioned through our climate change budgets. We've already got work at a pretty advanced stage, and we're in contractual discussions with the PPP providers for to install solar panels. We're also doing an LED replacement programme across the schools. So, you know, we're at that stage where we may hold off to 2025, but if the price is right, we'll be progressing those as quickly as possible.
On the back of that, I'm going to ask a question probably to both education and to Paul as the asset manager. Some time ago we spoke about bringing forward a strategy about managing our built estate within learning. All our education, recognising we've got a number of older schools, but there's also capacity issues and potential shortages of schools in the longer term. There's obviously a need to do that larger piece of work, looking at what we need for the future, and there's maybe an opportunity on the back of the expertise we've brought in around the PPP schools to look at starting that piece of work, because it will be substantial. And that could then help identify priorities across the learning estate and to where we need to invest, but also where we need to replace, and where there's going to be a shortage, so that we're planning for the future rather than being reactive.
Yes, Convener, I agree with you wholeheartedly that the approach that you've advocated. We do have the learning estate strategy, which was approved last year in advance of us making our learning estate investment programme bid to the Scottish Government. The next stage is for each individual school to be assessed, and it would have its own plan. That plan will in effect help us identify how we effectively and efficiently manage the wider estate. You bring it together and you'd identify themes. We're already working to establish performance measures across the estate. They are compliance, conditions, suitability, sufficiency, utilisation and accessibility and sustainability. They just roll off my tongue because it's such familiar territory. They will help us identify the prioritisation of our investment needs. And one of the ones you mentioned there is twofold: is the capacity utilisation and the accessibility. All of those will help us align our estate to where we need the capacity. That could involve things such as, and elected members will hate me for mentioning this, as you know, catchment reviews, school extensions, school integrations, a whole modernisation of the estate. But the estate is there for the longer term, and we need to treat it in that way.
Thank you for that,
Can I ask a question of that last statement about catchment reviews? Are you talking about amalgamating schools?
At this stage, I'm not really ruling anything in or out, but as we've seen from other authorities, you know, there is opportunities there, but at this stage, there's nothing on the table.
Well, that's kind of worrying for elected members, that if there's going to be school closures.
I don't think there was
closures.
no mention of school closures, but we do have capacity issues and therefore may require additional schools. And in order to be able to service those schools, there may well have to be a look at the catchment areas, but nobody had mentioned about school closures. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. I think that Councillor Spears's point, no last one, his previous point was very pertinent. Also, your point about the importance of looking at the wider school needs. I think that's very important for us as a council, and I think that work, when it gets underway, will be valued by us as a authority. But my question is probably Gary. Will the Class 98 agree with the district valuer's assessment?
I suppose the question is, the district valuer assessment will be the assessment. I'm not sure to raise any opposition. Again, we're developing and get it to. Sorry, we'll cross that bridge within the next couple of months, so we may have to come back to you. But at the end of the day, the contract is the contract. Is quite clear in the contract that we pay the lesser of the value of £5 million on the district value assessment. The realistically, we're not expecting the district value to come back with a value of under £5 million for the school estate. However, well, that remains to be seen.
Okay, thank you. Okay. That's all the questions, but a couple of comments, and I think Councillor Sinclair's comment regarding this is the first time it's come back is a very important point because it's never been done before. So other authorities will be looking at us to say, how did you do it? What was the pitfalls? How can we improve on that? And I'm sure, and I know we've got the team in place that will be able to deliver that. And Gary's, Councillor Bowsey's mentioned the DIL applications. A massive thing for us. I can remember when we spoke about Abbotsford House, it's £1 million DIL applications. And I nearly fell off my chair when they mentioned that amount of money. So it's a valuable point and something that I'm sure that our team will be on. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I'll go to Councillor Sinclair to sum up.
Thanks, Convener, and I won't take up too much time. I think I'm not going to focus on things that may be considered to be out of date and worn out. That may be subject to a future report coming forward. But I think what we've heard from the officers today is that this is very much a report that focuses on bringing these schools back in their optimal condition. And I think that's the important part, not just for the council. I think it considers the whole of the learning estate and what that means. I just wanted to touch on that. I think Councillor Hannah's point about everybody that comes into contact with schools in some way, shape or form, perhaps learning estate is too clinical a term for it, perhaps referring to the learning environment that we have in Falkirk, because you can learn in any situation, in any building, I suppose, is that point. But in terms of specifically the schools that we're talking about, the buildings that we're talking about, this is quite a positive report, and I think it shows what can be done when we're working at it. So thanks again to the officers for their tireless dedication on these issues and matters, and I look forward to the updates being brought forward as and when they're due. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, moving on to our final item, which is a review of the Devolved Schools Management DSM scheme, and we're welcoming Kenny McNeill to join us, and Kenny's going to take today's report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Convener. Good afternoon, colleagues. This report is to provide an update to the Education Executive on the progress that's been made over the last year in regard to the review of devolved school management. It further seeks to confirm the workstream areas that officers will be undertaking during 23-24. The DSM scheme also supports the Council Plan Enabler of Financial Sustainability, undertaking a review of a piece of work that will have a positive impact on children's services budget targets within the current financial strategy. There are 2 recommendations noted in section 2. Note the overall content of the report and agree that the Director of Children's Services can publish details of the updated scheme in August 2023 in line with Scottish Government requirements. Section 4 sets out the national review of DSM schemes, which commenced 2 or 3 years ago, and Falkirk previously reported progress against the national requirements in June 2022 and set out 10 objectives to be working on during 22-23. They're set out in section 5. I'm pleased to report good progress overall has been made against these targets, and I would draw your attention to some aspects of those 10 for information at this stage. Particularly, all head teachers are now non-teaching in line with their current management time arrangements in schools. Furthermore, the allocation of management time and resources to schools, whilst it's based predominantly on pupil role and demands arising through that, it further takes account of additional support needs and indexes of deprivation or free school meals as an indicator of deprivation. Furthermore, significant work has been undertaken with our head teacher DSM colleagues to undertake a review of what they currently have by way of management and resources within their schools, and to work with them to develop firm proposals for implementation commencing August 24 in regard to the management allocations and resources that will be allocated to each secondary school to ensure fairness and consistency across the entire sector. Participatory budgeting is not unfamiliar to elected members. We are working with our DSM working groups to identify elements of our devolved scheme of management that can be involved with participatory budgeting and to what extent that can be achieved. We'll be working further on this during session 23-24. Along with supporting a particularly significant area of work, which is continuing to reduce areas of bureaucracy in schools. And by reducing bureaucracy, what we're meaning is to have a devolved scheme of management which is bureaucratic light as much as possible, but in doing so, to recognise that time for head teachers and professionals in school, all staff in school, is very much about freeing up their time to contribute to learning and teaching and less on the demands of bureaucracy. Section 6 sets out the considerations that are earmarked for session 23-24. Of note in paragraph 6.2, proposals to undertake a review of our components of DSM which are aligned with year-end processes, to review these and to develop processes which are both consistent and bureaucratic light as referred to previously. Also to look at how we achieve savings through the DSM scheme through the application of that by empowered head teachers. Furthermore, to review our school fund procedures and to review and update our scheme for devolved supply cover, which is the scheme which pays for or allocates resources for the payment of teachers who cover colleagues in the school who are absent. Section 6.5 sets out protecting teacher numbers, pupil support staff and learning hours. Scottish Government advised local authorities on the 9th of February that teacher and support staff numbers must be maintained during session 23-24. It's therefore critical that our DSM arrangements in Falkirk align to the resources that are available to ensure that we actually meet those targets. For Falkirk, the 23-24 school staffing targets are teachers, 1,651 full-time equivalent teachers, and school support staff expressed as 13,700 hours per week. And those support staff would generally, you would recognise the term, would be support for learning assistants in schools. Section 7 sets out consultation. I'm pleased to report that we continue to work with our DSM working groups with trade unions and with and it's also planned that during the next session, early in the session, that we provide a briefing session for elected members on where we are with DSM and a bit more practical information around how the scheme works. So you can look forward to that early in August 23-24, book your tickets now. In terms of Section 8, the implications, we're working within the resources available in terms of finance. The significant risk that we face at the moment is achieving the teacher number target and achieving the pupil support target. There are consequences if we fail to meet those, and I'm pleased to report that our planning assumptions are spot on in achieving those targets, and my team are working extremely hard to deliver that on day one, as well as ensuring that sufficient staff are available in school. A full equality and poverty impact assessment has been completed and is set out in Appendix 1. Two of the protected groups are referred to in terms of disability and poverty, and full cognizance of the assessment will be taken on board moving the review forward. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Kenny. If you're going to get elected members along to a briefing on DSM, you're going to have to bribe them with food or cake or something. But I would encourage everybody to go along and see if we can uncover the mysteries around DSM, because it's something for many years that has been challenging. And I know that elected members have also been challenging back to the service around the clarity around the DSM. But I'll go to Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you, Convener. I've no incentive required on this stage. I've fully booked up my tickets already for the briefings, and once again, Mr McNeill, thank you for presenting the report in such detail. As has been referred to already, devolved schools management is a subject that is perhaps a mystery to some, so I'll be grateful that further briefings will be available to elected members as we get closer to the publication of the updated DSM scheme later in the summer. While we are once again, as every report that comes forward, looking at this from the point of view of the overall financial situation we face in Falkirk Council, this report clearly sets out a more efficient operating model, targeting resources where they are needed most. It's obviously showing good progress that's been made since last year, with further recognition given to the individual needs of schools and that of the wider education sector. It sets out a more updated picture on the situation, and I look forward to more information coming forward in due course. Thanks once again to everybody involved in bringing forward the report. I'm content to move the recommendations as set out previously. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Sinclair. I'm happy to formally second the report. I've got Mr Chalmers, who's online, and then I've got Councillor Spears. Mr Chalmers.
Yeah, hopefully, can you hear me this morning? Can you hear me okay this morning?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Just a few points, obviously, around about this. It's a little bit concerning how you've got several points of reducing, although it says not reducing management time and reallocating management time. Management within school tends to do an awful lot of work, which is sometimes unseen by the many of the teaching staff and things like that within the school, but they make sure that it runs smoothly. And it's rather worrying that there seems to be a reallocation or a moving around about on several points with it. First concern is that there has been an increase, and it was brought up at this forum, an increase in violence within schools recently. and this increase in violence, which seems to be more prevalent in some schools, but is often being dealt with by management. Now, if management are then going to have to do much more of the class teaching time and allocate it from there, yes, head teachers are out. If you've got a small allocation of management time, which has been reducing over the last few years anyway, you're going to be left with more pressure on one person to deal with every situation that comes up. As well as that, dealing with social workers, who are then maybe around about kids who are most vulnerable, dealing with all the other things that come up, dealing with parents. And if you've only got one head teacher dealing with that while deputies or PTs are all in class, it then puts a lot of pressure on the school. Your school then begins to sort of not run as smoothly as it often does. So it's going to have to be very careful with the numbers that we are looking at here. Another point was, obviously, I'm not sure, it says allocation of deputy heads and principal teachers being reallocated and things like that. My worry would be that if we don't continue to have PT posts within some of the primary schools, where is the leadership going to come from for deputy head teachers, teacher head teachers going forward from there? I know there's a lot of points then to be made from there, but you know, there's also the point as well. You're talking about the non-class contact time for teachers and things like that. There's a worry there that it's obviously going to be covered more with staff coming in rather than PE specialists, music specialists, art specialists coming down from a high school, which was a model a few years ago. So that's going back to a model that was in schools a few years ago. That's not a big concern there, but my concern there is we've got several teachers who've been relying on PE within schools to come and then be skilled within PE. We had a lot of highly skilled PE practitioners who were not able to then teach at high school, and so then left becoming PE teachers at the primary school level. There seems to be an awful lot of sort of wee bits and pieces coming in here that we need a lot more clarification around the DSM. So sorry about all my points. If anybody wants to ask any more about things, I've got another list that I've not actually added to this, so I can keep going, but I'll stop just now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chalmers. I'll go to David Mackay to respond.
Morning, John. Thanks very much for all your questions. I think probably to kind of cut through it, much of what you've described, we are planning to obviously talk through the various educational forums that will be planned in the coming weeks. And obviously the unions feature heavily in those conversations. Also note your comments regarding the class contact time, and while the approach that you described was working in some areas of the council, it wasn't universally operating as positively. We're also now currently looking at that to moving from the current system to the new model in the future months and years ahead. And obviously, we're on to number 4. Sorry about that. Yeah, so John, so we're obviously planning to engage in further conversation with yourselves and your other union colleagues regarding the questions that you've raised today. But I'm happy to take that offline.
That's great, thanks. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Spears.
Okay, thank you. It's good to see that deprivation, disability and poverty has been addressed, because it's needed probably more now than ever. But in your review of management and your use of management time, you mentioned fairness and consistency across the sector. Now, it is the Education and Young People's Committee, and maybe the elephant in the room is the exam results just now. So when you say fairness and consistency across the sector, and that learning and teaching is a priority, is there not a great disparity across the estate?
Okay. I think Mr. McNeil, and then maybe David, you want to comment about the exam results?
Thank you, Councillor Spears. Certainly resources are allocated, taking account of deprivation, poverty, additional support needs
Great
factors.
There's 3 sites of child poverty, multiple
Yeah,
deprivation.
so
Well,
the scheme, yeah, the scheme does factor that in, I'm pleased to say, and we are currently reviewing if there's any opportunity within the scheme to allow us to update our thinking moving forward, taking account of matters arising during the discussions with head teachers. And in regard to the equity and fairness observation you made, yes, the devolved scheme has to be fair and it has to allocate resources across all schools in a fair and equitable way. How head teachers use that is very much a matter for the school itself to form, and they're empowered, and the government's initiative is about empowering head teachers to make informed decisions. Whilst we're undertaking a review, Councillor, we are very aware that what we're doing is unpicking a machine that's been on the go for 15 years since it was last given a major overhaul. So there are elements of it where it's quite right to say there are some elements of it that need updated and will be updated. And that just makes sure that the resources, the tight resources that are available to the council are deployed fairly across, in this case, the secondary sector in a fair and reasonable manner. And that's not, and maybe it was ill-advised to use fair in the first case, but it's not to suggest for a second that they're unfairly distributed. But what we need to do and make sure in everything we put forward is that there's an equity assessment undertaken to how we allocate resources, and indeed that will be the case moving forward.
Okay, thank you, David.
Yep, thanks very much, Councillor. Obviously, our young people across Falkirk have just come to the conclusion of their exam diet for this year, and Declan was telling me today that he sat his final exam yesterday. So we're just mopping up the last 1 or 2 young people, and those exam results will be reported to the council in September, following their publication to the young people themselves towards the end of August this year. Historically, we obviously mark our attainment across Falkirk through the school leaver destination return, which we take to the committee just after Christmas each year when we get the data. And again, year on year, we've got really positive trends of the aggregated results across a whole lot of measures. But equally, there are single slices that you can take through the data that might show less favourable light in certain schools. However, when you look at the total performance of a school with the various options and opportunities they give to the young people, they then show a very balanced picture. But I know the councillor had some specific questions. I'm happy to arrange a meeting with myself and possibly the head teacher of the school in question to have a conversation about actually the real technicalities of what's on offer in those schools and actually what the attainment is for those young people.
I'm always pleased to meet you, but there is figures being circulated just now. I think the Braes High achieved something like 52%, 5 hires or more, and Grangemouth High was down at 26%, 5 hires or more.
I think we need to be.
We can have all the meetings. Sorry, I'm answering the
Councillor
question.
Spears.
I'm answering the
Councillor
question.
Spears, this isn't a back and forward. The officer's answered your question. Anyway, he's given you the opportunity, so I hope you'll take up the opportunity.
You're running away from this.
I'm not running away from anything, Councillor Spears, because we have continued to have sustained improvement around our attainment. I think we need to be very careful about picking on one particular year, as there can be variations for particular reasons. But overall, the authority has improved its attainment, and we have demonstrated that we are starting to show a closure of the poverty-related attainment gap, and I think that is something that's very positive. But if there are particular instances in particular schools, I would encourage people to take those up directly with the head teacher and with the service, and obtain the relevant explanations to why that is and what actions have been taken. But this report isn't around attainment today. You've had your opportunity, you've had your answer to your question. I'm going to move on to Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Convener. I'd like to thank Mr Chalmers for his contribution, particularly his comments regarding violence against teachers. We heard last week that the Scottish Government will be holding a summit, a convention, to get inputs from across Scotland regarding the rises that we've seen in these statistics. And I was just wondering, firstly, if the Council has had any contact from the Scottish Government since that announcement, and secondly, if so, will we be inviting school management to participate? Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. At this moment in time, we've not received any communication from the Scottish Government, but obviously we are keeping a wary eye for that because we're very much looking to be part of any national discussion so we can influence it.
Thank you. And the second question, if an invite is given, will we be inviting school management across the council to be involved?
Absolutely, we've got very collegiate working with our colleagues from schools, and particularly our head teachers, and we'll be actively engaging with them.
Thank you very much. That's me, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. To return to the report, I was wanting to ask you to look at 5.4. It refers here that it was raised by Mr. Chalmers as well, that about the provision of non-class contact time, in particular in relation to PE and music. Now, I don't regard PE and music as something that should be an add-on. I regard it as very fundamental, and I'm sure you do too. I was a wee bit concerned about the saving of 7 full-time equivalent teachers and how that's going to impact on the opportunities for pupils to participate in primary schools in PE and music learning.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Yeah, this was an initiative that began 7 or 8 years ago now, where we had a pilot where we were looking to use secondary school PE and music specialists into the primary sector. And that had some positive impacts in some of our clusters. However, other clusters had less positive experiences with that. Obviously, with the ongoing budget concerns that we have across the council, we're having to look at alternative means to make savings. In addition, we were also being made aware from primary colleagues of the de-skilling of some of our primary staff who had PE and music qualifications and historically would have taken those on as part of their classwork as well. So we've been doing a piece of work with our schools to realign that and to push that back into our primary schools so that those colleagues can regain that particular expertise and skill. Some of our secondary colleagues have chosen to move back into primary school where they've got dual qualifications and they'll be supporting the process, but it's part of a wider review. And the 7 FTE saving is the travelling between the schools that was lost from the secondary colleagues having to move around the authority, which is a significant saving when you put that, when you monetize that. So obviously we've been taking the balance in terms of the total impact of the project and the piece of work. So PE music won't be lost within our primary schools. It'll just be it'll be delivered in a different manner in future.
Thank you. I would appreciate offline to have a further discussion about the provision of PE and music. And if I may ask for a little bit of indulgence, since Mr. Mackay raised the issue of Declan and his exams, I would like to just offer my thanks to Declan for his contribution to this committee and wish him all the best in his future career. I think we should say that up front, and I'm sure all other colleagues will agree with me on that one.
Absolutely. I'm sure it'll not be the last we'll see and hear of Declan, and we'll go on to achieve in the future. Okay, if there are no other questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Kirk.
I'll be brief, Convener. Just to be warned, he's very interested in politics. So just be warned. Probably the what David's already mentioned there, the teachers who went to the primary schools, it was a trial period, which a lot of schools, very successful trial period, and the primary schools benefited from it immensely. I'm glad that we're not stopping it, and as everybody knows, these proposals need to be looked at because we're on financial restraints, and it's going to get even harder as we go forward. So I'd just like to thank Ms Neil for the report and look forward to come to the DSM briefing. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerr. I'll go back to Councillor Sinclair just to wind up.
Yeah, thanks, convener, and I think it's been an interesting. There's been interesting contributions. I think it's safe to say that our young people have had a really hard time with it over the past few years, and I think the important thing about this is that the report shows where resources can be targeted and most effectively used. And yeah, just to concur with the other comments about Declan, best of luck, and thank you to officers for the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're happy to agree the report.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you, everybody. That brings us to this morning, at the end of this morning's Education, Children and Young People's Executive. Thank everybody for their contributions this morning, and I hope you get the opportunity, if you can, to get out and enjoy some of the sunshine, as I think today's to be about one of the hottest days we have to have. Thank you.